This is the Everything Weight Loss podcast with Shari Ware, where we talk about everything, all things, anything to do with weight loss, health, and wellness. So today we have Scott Tegan from Workout Wellness, who is a wellnesspreneur, master functional trainer, sports trainer, injury rehabilitation coach, chef, and is also qualified in nutrition and dietetic assistance. Scott's vision is to assist 1 million people to improve their health and wellness for themselves. And I just want to say, first of all, welcome you to the show, Scott. Thank you for joining me today.
Welcome. Thank you very much for having me, Shari.
Thank you for giving me some really big words to get my mouth around in that introduction. And there's a lot of things in there, and I know that it comes from your backstory. So tell us why you do what you do. How did it all come about?
I turned 30 and I found myself in a place I really didn't want to acknowledge, in being 140 kilos. And it was a little embarrassing. I had a lot of relatives around and I was sleeping fine, but they all had to go to the other end of the building to get some sleep because my snoring was so horrific. And that's what sort of triggered an awareness for myself that something needed to be done. So from there, I had a look at different things, and I didn't really like the overlook or the outlook from the general fitness industry, and I was really frustrated with their whole focus on aesthetics, and don't particularly like the go hard or go home attitude. And I know it doesn't work for me, and I know it doesn't work for a lot of people. So I started to have a look at different options for myself, and in the end, I went, and that's where I went and started my own fitness journey, went and got my own qualifications. When I understood what a lot of the fitness training was around, it was a 16-week part-time course. And then all of a sudden people could, they knew everything and they would tell you what to do. And a lot of people were extremely young, straight out of school, and didn't really have any life experience around things. So it didn't resonate with me, and B, I didn't have any respect. I didn't believe they had enough knowledge to be able to help me with what I needed. So I did, as you can see, I've got a lot of pieces of paper, which really don't mean anything. But for me, what it's about is to getting an understanding, because everyone's very different. And that's what I found in my experiences with the fitness industry and with different people is a lot of it's a cookie cutter style approach, because it's very hard to make money when you've got to tailor every single little thing to every single individual person. And if you're doing that, you have to charge exorbitant amounts of money, because it takes a lot of time and effort to do that for every individual. So that's really where it stems from. And so that's been also part of why I do what I do. And also what I find is working for people is I really treat them individually. So the other component was there was no personal training. That was the part that I found. Go to a gym and sit on the gym machine and do 10 reps of this, and then move to the next one, do 10 reps of that, and or go to a boot camp where there's 15 people all doing the same movements on the same equipment, but no one's at the same fitness level and everyone's got different injuries. So to me, it didn't, and none of it made any sense.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to ask this question and this question first, and then I want to go back to what you just said a little bit. I really like asking this question. It's my favorite question, actually. No, my second favorite question. And the reason is because it makes people really think about their innate strengths. And so if I was to ask you if you were to have a superpower, what would it be? What would your answer to that be?
I'd definitely say it's how I connect to my people, to my clients, and like I mentioned before, everyone's very individual, and everyone actually thinks they need a personal trainer, but they actually don't. I have a 4-stage philosophy, and well, I call it a priority pyramid, and the exercise is the lowest of the 4 priorities. But getting to understand someone properly, to know, so they've and it's why I went and got a PT qualification, because that's what people go to. They don't actually need a PT as such. Everybody knows you've got to exercise and you've got to move, but there's underlying things as to why they think they need someone there to hold their hand to do that. And it's the discovery and being able to get in tune with that person around what it is that they're actually really looking for, or what it is that a lot of people are feeling that they're missing something, that they're not complete themselves, and so they're looking for someone else to fill that void, whether it be through training, and a lot of times it's motivation or accountability. But for many people, it's usually an emotional level. It's other elements that you've got to have to deal with those first. And so that's really where I find that that pinpoint quite quickly and easily. Sometimes it might take 4 to 6 weeks before we really stumble on what the actual problem really is.
Yeah.
And it allows us to start working on it. But I'd have to say it's definitely connecting with people and getting past all their bullshit and through all the layers and understanding what is this really about.
Yeah, and that's the thing so many people don't realise, is that it's not just as easy as saying, oh, why don't you stop that? I actually had somebody say to me, oh, why don't you just stop eating? And I turned around to them and I said, do you really think that if it was that easy, I wouldn't have done it by now?
Yeah.
That's just a symptom of the problem. That's not the root cause. And in my experience, I don't know about you, but in my experience, most often the root cause is something emotional. There is a reason for every single thing that we do.
Absolutely.
And it all comes back to how we feel about ourselves most often than not. So I love what you've already said. What I want now to ask more about is, how do all those things fit into what you do? How do you work with people? How do you help people so that people get more of an understanding of how all of those things work in together?
Probably if I give you an example of one of my clients, is probably be a really good way to fit all that in. So a client I've got currently who's actually just come back and started back with me after about a 12-month hiatus. They're having relationship problems, and the relationship has actually broken down in that 12 months. It was there was too much happening on the relationship front, and it was it ended up being what it needed to be, and they went their own separate ways. And so now that client started back with me about 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So the client's main goal is they have a significant birthday coming up in December. Mm-hmm. And they have the usual dress, the beautiful little dress that they want to fit into. And so that's the hard goal that we're striving towards.
Yeah.
Now the client has no patella in their right knee. Okay, so that knee just gives way at any particular point in time. So that's your kneecap. So there's no kneecap in that right knee. Yeah. Originally, there were requirements for surgery. We talked with the physio and we had a look at options, and we went and got scans, and I was very diligent on trying to look at other options other than surgery, because I was just going to do a knee replacement. That was the plan before I got involved. When they did some more scans and she went and got a second opinion, it turned out that there was a spur, and that's what was creating all of the pain. Oh. So they did an arthroscope and they got rid of the spur, and hence the pain went away. But the main reason I'm working with this particular client is because the kneecap is not there and the knee just lets go and collapses. They have fallen down the stairs in the past and actually fractured their C4. So it's broke their neck. Wow. So it's very, very scary for the client, even to walk. So most of the sessions we do, the physical exercise we do, is we simply walk around the block.
Yeah.
Because the client doesn't feel safe enough to do that by themselves.
Mm.
And they need to have the reassurance that if something does happen, somebody is there. But with what has been going on in the past and throughout life, it is the emotional stuff that is having the huge impact on the weight loss.
Mm.
So we're doing 3 laps of the block a week and we're losing a kilo a week.
Mm.
When you try and explain that to people who haven't seen an emotional journey before and an emotional weight loss before, it's very, very hard to understand.
Yeah.
This client is down about 30 kilos at the moment, and we're looking for, we've got another 6, just over 6 to go.
Yeah. That is awesome, and I love that whole story. I want to ask though, are there, and look, weight loss is great. I actually call it weight release.
Yes.
That's because of my journey and what I've learned. Language is very important, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure that's something that you're aware of as well. What about other benefits though? Because there's so much, and you touched on it before, people are so focused on the aesthetics. They're focused on the exercise, like they think that exercise, so many people think that exercise is going to fix everything, which is certainly great, so beneficial. There's so many reasons why we need to, and this is another language thing I've learned, is move our body. Move is important. But what about the other benefits that this is having on your client?
Mental health component is the most understated thing that's out there.
Yeah.
So even I have clients that don't need any weight loss at all, and they get the same benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But their mental stability, their resilience to deal with situations, their ability to have clarity throughout the day, and their energy levels are at much higher levels, so they're able to, function at a much higher level without doing anything else. And that takes them a while usually to understand that, and for them to realize that that's what the exercise component is giving them. And I am like you, Shari, I do appreciate that. I use the word exercise far too often. But when I'm doing my little priority pyramid with people, I use the word movement as well. Simply because if I said to you, hey, let's do some stuff, you're going to get all hot, sweaty, smelly, stinky, and guess what? And you're going to pay me money for the sake of doing that, and you'll be sore tomorrow. Exercise is really a dirty word for most people.
Yeah.
So, and in this case I just used, movement, it only has to be movement. It can be subtle movement, especially if we're trying to rehab something. One of my other clients has dislocated shoulders that just fall out whenever. And so he has no confidence and has no trust in his own body because of those experiences. Yeah. And so through really small targeted movements, he now has massive amounts of confidence. He'll actually pick up items that he would never even think of in the past, because before he would think, oh, well, it's 10 kilos. If I touch that, my shoulder's going to fall out of its socket joint. Yeah. So there's the mental health component is, I think, by far probably the most understated and the most beneficial, because everything, as you know, I know a little bit about what you do as well. Everything flows from your mental attitude and from your mental health. Yeah. So the better that can be in a higher the position that can be in, the easier life becomes.
Well, it's like anybody can make change for the short term. We can all change so many things in our lives for 12 weeks or,
Yeah. It's a 12-week challenge. Woohoo, let's go.
We can all do that. Everybody can do that. It's about what happens after the 12 weeks. Are we really changed? Have we actually gotten to the thing that's going to give us long-term change? Because I'm sure your clients are not, your client that you just told us the story about who's down 30 kilos, I'm sure she doesn't want that 30 kilos to come back when she's finished working with you. So
that's right.
Yeah, really important.
It's the sustainability. And so when I talk to clients about it, in the early days, I use a priority level for them. And it's because there's been a significant situation, whether it just means they have had an awakening, or the doctor has told them that they need to make a change, or a loved one or another stakeholder in their life has said, hey, wake up, something's going on, you need to look at your health. So what's happened there is that the priority for themselves has gone from probably number 22 up to number 1.
Yeah.
And then throughout life, after the 12 weeks and after they get to the goal, that goes from being the number 1 priority all the way back down to wherever else it sits. So the reason is to make it that focus of a priority in the least in the top 4 or 5 things in your life and keep it there forever. Otherwise, that's why we get on that circle, which we just talked about, where we go, even you and I do that, we go up and down. You know, we put a few kilos back on because we've had something that's impacted our life, and our focus has changed, and so we're not as focused on our own health as we should be.
Yes.
And that's life, right? That's a huge part of what happens in life.
And this is the thing as well. So many people beat themselves up about that. And then that just creates a whole chain reaction of negativity that then impacts your mental health more. So I find that so many people just need to know that they're not alone. Especially in this crazy world that we're in right now. There's so many people have had their resilience tested, have had their all of these things tested, their mental health, their emotional health, their physical health, even to not be able to go out of their homes. And so many people don't know how to deal with that. So to know that, hey, this is human. You're not a bad person. It's not that you don't have any willpower or that you just have no control over yourself, which is, things, I don't know about you, but I was told many times in the past. It's not anything about that. And to give ourselves a break doesn't mean it's about giving ourselves excuses, but acknowledging, hey, we're not bad people. We might have some work to do, and we can do that. So let's just make the next best step.
Yeah. I have a lovely little saying with my clients that I use when they say, give me all these excuses about what's happening. I say, okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that you were just human. Yeah. That's all right.
Yes.
We'll talk about that a little bit more. You're just human. Okay. I'm sorry. I was expecting a little bit too much. Yeah. It's this particular time is, like you've just mentioned, people don't understand how, from no fault of their own, their coping mechanisms were taken away from them. So they've gone through their life, and the simple walk outside of an afternoon with their partner has such an impact on their emotional and their mental health, and then that gets taken away from them, and they're no longer able to do that. And their coping mechanism is not there anymore.
No.
And so that whole change in society that was, the carpet was pulled out from underneath our feet.
Yeah.
People haven't realized that they unconsciously have put all of those things into their life for reasons to manage their own health and their well-being. And now that they've been torn away, it is no fault of their own, but it is very hard for people to realize that, you are just human, and that now you've got a much smaller selection of things to choose from to allow you to deal with things. And for some people, it is food, it is alcohol, because sitting still locked up in your own home feels like you're in jail. I can relate to that.
Yeah, and so many people just they're beating up on themselves. However, it's just about finding a different way, finding a different way that works for you. And I'm not saying that I said just. Sometimes it can be a little bit tricky to find that way. It might take some trial and error, but that's where people like us come in. Sometimes we need a different perspective from somebody else, even just having a conversation. It's amazing. I love that you said that you just would go for a walk around the block with your client, because I'm sure that when you were doing that walk around the block, you weren't silent. I'm sure you were having a conversation, and the power of conversations. I've had so many aha moments, and I've had other people have massive aha moments just from having a conversation that we never saw where it was going. So that's beautiful. I love that. Thank you. So obviously the way that you work with people is individual, depends on what they need, and you bring in whatever skills you have that particular person needs at the time.
Yeah, it's interesting that years back when I started, I sat down and I thought, I've got all these weird things, like I'm a chef, I've worked in sales, and I've now got PT and different qualifications in that space. And I thought to myself, how's this all gonna, like, what am I gonna do? And all of a sudden, the right people started finding me, and it was the different things from my experiences as to what they were looking for and what they needed. They were able to get from me from a different mix, I suppose, which is probably the right way to look at it. And it's a fresh perspective, and it's a different way, because all of these people have tried lots of different things before, and they seem to be on the wheel and they fall off the wheel and they get back on the wheel, and they don't get that sustainable change that they're looking for. And I believe strongly that it's because all they've done is address their exercise or movement component and what they stick in their mouth. They haven't addressed the other two major components where I start my focus, which is in mindset and stress.
Yeah, stress is a really big one, and there's so many people who actually just think that stress is a cop-out. Like they tell themselves, oh yes, I'm stressed, but it really doesn't have that much of an impact. But it does if you look into the science.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Not just making this stuff up. If you look into the science, it has so many it causes so many problems with our hormones, stress. So it's definitely
yes.
So I want to ask you, what do you see as being the biggest mistakes that people make or actually don't like the word mistakes? What are the things that you see people do most often that don't serve them when it comes to their health and wellness?
I think they take a long time to find the learnings. And so they'll go through the diet, the fad, exercise program, these quick fix. And when something doesn't go their way, then they look for the next quick fix. So my philosophy revolves around them getting inside themselves and understanding themselves, because everybody has everything that they need within them.
Yes.
And it's a part of our programming from society that we have to look outside. We have to look at, we have to be consuming all of this stuff to be worthwhile. And so they'll take a long time before they understand that everything they need is within them, and that they just have to focus on why they're actually doing this. What's the real reason behind doing this?
Yeah.
Now, it might be, the goal might be to lose the weight, but that's not the real reason. The real reason is because they don't love themselves. They feel ashamed of the way they are, their size, or they feel ashamed of whatever. So to hide the shame, they eat. And so you have to address all those other components.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that I say is that it's really important and most times it does come back, especially when it's a weight release goal. It's about not loving ourselves. Not saying that there's sometimes it's not better to be a healthier weight, but there's no guarantee that if you get to that magic number, and I know this from experience, that if you get to that magic number, or when you get to that magic number, that you're going to like what you see in the mirror, because I didn't.
It is unbelievable that I've worked with some people who have had surgeries and lost a lot of weight. I worked with a young man who lost 120 kilos.
Wow.
but he looked in the mirror and he still saw his old self.
Yep.
He couldn't get past the change. He couldn't adapt. He didn't understand that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
But that was where he was trapped in his own mind and his own emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a huge thing.
Yeah. So definitely got to do that inner work along the way. Absolutely. So what would you say would be the steps, 1 or 2, 3 steps that people need to take for their best health and wellness, or some things that they can do that's going to help them the most? And what would be one action step that they can take after listening to this episode?
Daily affirmations are because everything stems from the attitude.
Mm.
And so the first thing I talk to my people about is whatever the change is that you want to make, it's not going to happen when you get out of bed of a morning and the first thing you say to yourself is, I'm overweight, I'm lazy, I'm tired, I feel like I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. Nothing's going to happen. If anything, it'll probably just escalate and get worse.
Mm.
And so we need to allow ourselves to feel that, but we also have to be able to shift that out, because we can't hold on to that. Because I'm not a miracle worker and I'm not Superman. And doesn't matter how much I do, when you're trapped in that space, nothing's going to change.
And you can't be there for every person as they get out of bed and tell them, you can do this. They've got to learn to do that for themselves, don't they?
Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me on this conversation today. I think it's, as I said before, conversations are so important. One of the biggest things I say is we don't know what we don't know. I can tell you 10 years ago, I had no idea about the world that I now live in when it comes to nutrition, when it comes to the importance of how our brain works, the things, the power of our unconscious mind, and what impact it can make on our lives is just phenomenal. Had no idea about any of that, and there's so many people out there that still don't know any of this stuff. So it's important to have conversations with people like yourself. So thank you for doing that with me.
My pleasure.
And what I always like to ask at the end of the episode is, if there was one thing that you want people to know after listening to this episode, what would be the one thing that you want them to walk away knowing?
That feeling of unworthiness or not being able to do it doesn't last forever. It's a real statement that had impact on me early on, and I see that with clients regularly. And everybody goes through and has those moments, and in that time you don't feel like anything is going to change. You feel very stuck. But let me reassure you that we'll always change. It will never stay that dire. It will always get better. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And thank you for being so honest with me today. I know that, and this is really good for people to know that even people like us, it's not a perfect road. We still have, we're human too. We still have these struggles, just like you do if you're listening or you're watching. We're just like you, and it's just about finding those people to help us in the way that we need to be helped, or finding that thing that's going to help us at the time, because that can change as well along the way depending on what's going on. So thank you so much for joining me today, Scott.
Thanks, Shari. My pleasure.
Awesome. And I'll see you all on the next episode. See ya. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Remember to check out the show notes, and if you have any comments, feedback or suggestions, I'd love to hear them. If you've received value from this podcast, make sure to subscribe, and I'd love you to rate and review the show. Have a fabulous day.